For Juris Doctorate, for several years, she worked as an assistant Commonwealth attorney in Norfolk, prosecuting felonies and misdemeanors on the Drug and General and Special Crimes team. She has now joined Regent as director of the Center for Global Justice, overseeing students while they work on various research projects, but also partnering with our connections around the world. Since being director, she launched a clinic to provide advocacy to human trafficking survivors and helped a victim secure the first Medicare petition granted in Virginia. She is also professor of the Human Trafficking Clinic here on campus. She's a wife, mother, professor, and director, and we are so happy to have her. Please join me in welcoming Professor Kelsey.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you to the Journal staff for a very smooth, wonderful, delicious symposium. And I have loved the first two panels, so thank you for those who participated and just for the students for coming. And I'm excited for this third panel as we continue looking at identity and the rights of children, rights of parents, to turn to partners who Regent University, the Regent Law School, and the Center have worked closely with for years, that now I get to interview and discuss with close partners of the Center for Global Justice, with Nkosi and GMPC Child Care Ministries. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and we will jump into questions concerning challenges that children are facing both in the United States and abroad. So next to me is Peter Sewachiriyanga of Uganda. Peter is a tireless advocate for the criminalization of child sacrifice in Uganda. He is a pastor, he is also an accountant, and in addition to those things, Peter oversees GMPC Child Care Ministries, or KCM. The focus of KCM is to capture and convict child sacrifice offenders and other exploiters, to lobby for laws that protect victims, the children in Uganda, and to end the practice of child sacrifice, and also to rehabilitate children who have been mutilated. KCM provides educational opportunities for the underprivileged and most vulnerable. The school on the KCM property has a 92% pass rate, which is the best performance in the region for the past several years. They offer affordable and accessible child and maternal health care services. The clinic has expanded to the town surrounding the rehab center. And they help provide fresh water to more than 3,000 people in the GMPC village. Peter is passionate about improving the standard of living for children and their families in GMPC. And he has been a guest here at Regent Law School multiple times, as well as welcoming our students and professors there. So thank you, Peter, for joining today. Secondly, we have Tori Hirsch. Tori Hirsch is a legal counsel at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation Law Center, or Nkosi. She litigates against mainstream sexual exploiters and specializes in reviewing and drafting legislation and regulatory policy to prevent sexual exploitation, including online sexual abuse of children. Tori graduated in 2022 from Regent Law School, where she was a senior editor on Law Review and also a staff member of the Center for Global Justice. She is licensed to practice law in Maryland and New Hampshire. So thank you, Tori, for driving down to join us today. So in this panel, we'll address and discuss challenges with child protection, but also look at progress and opportunities that you as students and attorneys will have the opportunity to engage in. Tori, I want to start with you as you work with Nkosi. First, to share more about the work that Nkosi does, specifically in this realm of child protection and the issues you address. Which challenges do you see that children are facing every day in your line of work?
Yeah, well, I'll just start and say it's great to be back here at Regent. It's been a few years since I graduated, but very fond memories, some not so fond of studying here. But yeah, Nkosi, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, our mission is to create a world where people can live free from sexual abuse and sexual exploitation, and that includes children as well. So a lot of our work is based on the law. So we have a civil litigation boutique firm within the greater Nicosi name. So we litigate on behalf of child survivors of sexual exploitation in addition to adult survivors. And we do that in a number of jurisdictions. We have a small, powerful team, and we also have summer interns, which is how I initially heard about Nicosi and got involved there, and I'll talk more about that later. And another branch of Nicosi is our legislation. So we're involved in a number of state and federal efforts to address the issue of exploitation, addressing things from prostitution law reform to internet policy to device filtering to age verification at the website level. So a number of efforts on those fronts as well.
Thank you for sharing about Nicosi. And if you could just even start us off, which challenges facing children do you all primarily address, and are you addressing?
So one of the largest challenges that we face is the interpretation or misinterpretation of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. So it's also known as CDA 230 or Section 230, but it's titled Protection for Private Blocking and Screening of Offensive Material. And it's often known, Section C1, as the 26 words that created the internet back in 1996 when the Communications Decency Act was passed, but it reads, "No provider of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information provider." So essentially what this means is that websites cannot be held liable for content uploaded by a third-party user. And this was a small section that was included in a larger child protection bill that was kind of included as a compromise and incentive for technology companies to make good faith efforts to screen for harmful content by reducing their risk of liability. But later, upon challenge, the entire statute, except for that Section 230, was struck down as unconstitutional. So basically, this broader child protection package fell away, and only the liability protection for these websites remained as Section 230. And so, getting to the challenges, the result of this is that judicial interpretation of the section has meant de facto blanket immunity for any internet platform for anything related to third-party content. So the courts have taken a very broad view of this, and as a result, the tech industry really has no incentive to self-police or to invest in safety and technology, because if they can't be sued, then what's the point of spending money on safety features when there's no risk of them being held liable for a breach of that safety or that duty. And so that's kind of the real challenge that we're facing, especially as it comes to our litigation. It's really a cost-benefit analysis for big tech that has resulted in the massive proliferation of online sexual exploitation. So essentially, the creation of Section 230, the existence, the way the courts have interpreted Section 230, we can't sue. I mean, we're trying to sue, but they have, essentially shut us out every time to sue at the motion to dismiss stage, because these websites raise Section 230 as a defense, and it's resulted in a lot of victims not being able to see their day in court at all. So that's kind of the main thing that we're seeing as a challenge.
And we'll get into maybe some of the specific cases and procedural challenges, but what you're getting at and addressing there, we heard in the prior panel that Joseph laid out that this has real-world effects of when our children are being exposed to pornography and how they are learning about physical intimacy and sex. And so the interpretation of these laws is having detrimental effect on real people. As Mia said, this is real families and real children who are being impacted. So thank you for sharing about your line of work. Now, with talking with Peter, I recognize there are challenges with electronic exposure to pornography and electronic access through phones, which we'll get to. But if you could first, Peter, share more about KCM, the work you do, and some of the challenges you're addressing through the ministries.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you, everybody, for having me. KCM is a pioneer organization in recognizing the problem of child sacrifice, particularly in Uganda. And it started really with me having a personal interface with a child I knew, a close friend of mine who was 8, that was kidnapped from the soccer academy I had started. And so the issue of child sacrifice confronted me firsthand. The child went missing, and after 3 days we found his decapitated body, rotting, and no head, genitals and other body parts had been cut off. So it was a really unpacking of a lot of challenges that surrounded the issue of investigation of a child sacrifice. The police relied basically on a mother to finance the investigation, a single mother who had lost her son, and I took it upon myself to get involved, picking up the pieces, taking the body to the morgue for forensic examinations, facilitating the police, leading an operation to arrest the suspects that we had found, and walking through the processes of prosecution. And then I realized this child was born in a village of Champisi, so I put the body on my truck, took it to Champisi for the funeral. I led the funeral myself, and I saw the pain of the community, the mother, the family, and the frustration all through the process. A few days later, I received a call from a family that had lost 3 in the same village of Champisi. And so we realized there was a problem. And so from that, KCM was birthed, and we realized there was more cases happening. To cut the story short, one of those cases of 3 children that were surviving was Alani's case, which is in the journal that the Center for Global Justice has worked on with us. There was challenges in investigations. Police did not know. First of all, police feared the witch doctors that were doing this because they thought that if they arrested them, they will be bewitched, or the powers, the spiritual powers would intervene. So there was fear. There was denial of the government entities, parliament, because when it is elections time, usually that's when children are killed more, because politicians believe that when you kill a child, you get voted through politics, especially if you cut off their hand and you wave to people. It will be a magnet for you to get elected. And so there was a lot of resistance, and so we had to go through all that. And then we realized there were so many cases that were happening, and the challenges were investigations, prosecution, there was corruption. Prosecutors had no viable tool to describe the issue, so we had to work alongside over 10 years to develop a law that now is being used to prevent and prohibit human sacrifice. There was the trauma, there was the fear in the whole of the country about what was happening, and so there was challenges of awareness within the communities. The witch doctors were feared, but they continued to kill children. So what we do is we go with the police partnership we have now to rescue. We have a very intentional rescue and operations team that works undercover and with intelligence to go and find those people that kidnap and sacrifice children. We proactively follow cases that have happened where we support the police in investigation, forensic examinations, and follow the case to its logical conclusions through prosecution. We have a rehabilitation center, which would be called an alternative care, where we provide social protection, because if these children who are key witnesses are not protected, then the cases will die. And so we provide, right now we have over 100 children in our rehabilitation center that are protected. And we take those children through the processes of trauma healing. We provide medical care. Right now in the United States, we have 2 children that have come for surgical procedure to reconstruct their bodies that have been mutilated. Unfortunately, many children die. And then we work with government and international to lobby. And recently we were, because there's a lack of international awareness, and so the resources are limited in regards to approach to intervention, to the support, and so we do appreciate this, the work that the Center for Global Justice has given us in the prosecution of cases. In fact, the precedence cases that have been successfully prosecuted have been through the support of the Center for Global Justice, and we do appreciate that.
Thank you, Peter. And it's challenging even just to hear what is happening. This is today, this is present day Uganda. And when I joined the center, we were engaged in various research projects, and I remember reading about Alan's case, which Professor Combe mentioned in the opening, and then had the opportunity to visit this summer for 2 weeks to Uganda and went to church with a prosecutor who we've been connected with through the center, Rachel Bicole, and went to church with her family, which was a beautiful Anglican church, sweet community. But even in that service, I remember the pastor exhorting the congregation to turn to Jesus and Jesus alone and not also their witch doctor. So even in the Christian community, in common culture, it's so ingrained in the culture that this is deeply believed. These are deeply held beliefs for generations, for many, many years. And so there is this syncretism. And while that may look different in the United States, we can see there's a common root at this of people are concerned with their own success, with political power, with business success, and they're told that the steps to achieve that are through these atrocious acts, but ultimately it's for power and financial gain. And so, turning back to Nkosi, we can see those are commonalities with the parties that you are going up against are after those same things: power, political power, and financial gain. And so a child is not necessarily seen as a human in that case. They're simply, a means to an end. So while the practices in Uganda and the United States may look differently, I think we can see at the root there's a commonality of dismissing humans as an object or a means to an end. And so, Tori, coming back to you, you've mentioned some of the challenges in the interpretation of the laws. Could you expound on how those cases have developed in court and maybe some of the current cases or recent cases that your team has worked on?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about some of our current cases. So the first one I'll touch on is called Doe v. MindGeek. It is in the Northern District of Alabama. And Jane Doe was a minor when she was brutally raped by this man who claimed to be her boyfriend. And he took videos of her as that was happening and uploaded them to Pornhub. MindGeek is the parent company of Pornhub. So our case basically lays out that simple, horrific situation that happened to her. And the video was uploaded. There were no safeguards in place to ask whether she had consented to that, whether she was not a minor, and same for the uploader as well. He had an account, and all he had to do was just upload the video. No verification in place whatsoever. So that kind of is one issue that I can circle back to, is the lack of age verification and consent verification. So we essentially allege that those acts, the act of her video being uploaded to the Pornhub website, and all videos on Pornhub are monetized, so each video has advertisements, targeted advertisements for users based on location, based on their interest, based on a lot of things about them. So through those advertisements, that video was monetized, and that is sufficient to bring a sex trafficking claim. So we brought sex trafficking claims against MindGeek for benefiting from her sex trafficking, financial benefit. The law states that it could be anything of value that's exchanged for a commercial sex act. In this case, it happened to be money. And they raised a 230 defense saying that because that content, which is actually contraband, it's of a minor, so that's never considered content. When we look at pornography involving adults, that's a little bit fuzzier of boundaries just because of obscenity law. But for her situation, she was a minor, it was uploaded, it was contraband, they benefited from it, and they raised a Section 230 defense essentially saying that because it was uploaded by a third party, that they were not responsible for anything about it, that they were just a provider, a host of this interactive website, and shouldn't be held liable for the proliferation of her abuse. A few things that they tried to hide that we found out and alleged to is that they actually contributed to that content, which makes them a content creator by adding tags and recommending categories for what occurred in that video, and also creating their own thumbnails, which that act of creating a thumbnail is an independent violation of creating child sexual abuse material, which is illegal to possess, create, distribute, share, publish, any of that. So they made the mistake of being super involved, or the mistake, I guess it's good because we're holding them liable now, but they contributed to the creation of that content, which took them outside of the blanket protection of Section 230, which means we got past the motion to dismiss stage, which is a very hard thing to do with these cases. And so that case has been in discovery for a number of years. It actually was in discovery before I even came to Nicosi almost 2 years ago, and we're finally facing trial in the fall. So that is a huge victory that I am excited to share about, but it just goes to show how difficult it is in the courts to prove liability on behalf of these huge companies, which make billions of dollars from profiting from people's exploitation. You know, whether it's minors, they claim they're not responsible, and they don't, going back to age verification, well, now this is changing, which I'm very thankful the tide is changing, but at the time, there was no age verification required. All users had to do to access pornography online is just check a box that they were above age 18. There was nothing else that they had to do. So that's part of the problem we're seeing. States are taking very decisive action now to implement age verification of pornography websites. I guess I might as well talk about that now. I can get back into our other cases later. But I believe 19 states have passed age verification laws requiring pornography websites to use commercially reasonable methods to age verify users before allowing them access, which is not a hard thing to do, but there's a number of constitutional concerns from other groups, Free Speech Coalition, Net Choice, these large big tech lobbyists that want to, let people have free and unrestricted access to pornography because it continues to make them money. If minors are addicted to pornography, that just means more money in their pockets. So they don't care about the harms of pornography that it causes to children. They're just worried about the profit. And so they raised free speech as a challenge, saying that requiring people to do more than click a checkbox is a violation of their free speech and their right to access pornography. So a number of these states are creating laws that are trying to regulate in that sphere, and that's based on a long history of constitutional law of how we got there. But there's some recent cases that are very encouraging to see in that regard. But I can touch on one other case that we have. It is in South Carolina, federal court, and it is Doe v. Limestone. So a number of women who played field hockey for a school in Indiana were invited to play a game against Limestone University, their field hockey team. And one of the Limestone employees who worked in the athletic department, he set up a spy cam in the women's locker room and filmed them as they were changing and getting ready for their games, and then subsequently uploaded that to the Pornhub website and a number of other pornography websites. X-Hamster was one of them too. And so we sued the school and the individual, and then also, again, these pornography websites were benefiting from those videos that were not taken consensually, they were not uploaded consensually, the women didn't even know they were being filmed. And now, of course, they live in fear that someone they know will see the video of them that was taken without their consent, or that their children will see it, or that it will, affect them being able to get a job. And so, sort of a similar situation to the last case, we successfully got around a 230 defense for some of the same reasons, creation of those thumbnails, those tags and categories as well, that brought them into the creation category instead of just being a publisher or a host of that, of those videos. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Both the litigation is in response to wrongs that have been done, exploiting children, and also approaching the policy side, the legislation that can be changed to shift the tide, change definitions, change approaches to preemptively provide protection. Before I go back to Peter though, Tori, could you share how in those approaches, both with litigation and the policy, wanting to change legislation, how either parental rights, juggling either parental rights or the state's involvement in loco parentis, how does that affect your work in either of those approaches?
So when it comes to parental rights, especially in the realm of children having access to pornography, children do not have a constitutional right to access pornography. That is specifically protected adult speech, and only to the extent that it's not obscenity, which the DOJ is no longer prosecuting obscenity, so that's kind of an entirely separate question, because I would make the argument that most pornography today would be considered obscene and illegal. But when it comes to parental rights, these big tech companies are essentially saying the responsibility falls solely on the parent to make sure that their children aren't exposed to these, horrific things online. So, have a device filter in place, have some, parental filtering turned on, and Apple and Google have that capability in their device, but it's hidden behind layers and layers of, menus and screens and really difficult settings. So they're hiding it from parents. It's not easy. And, one of the things we advocate for in our legislative efforts is a simple device-level filter, which already exists on the phone. Just requiring it to be defaulted to on is such a simple ask, and we're getting so much pushback just because of what it would mean for, their profit or their revenues. So, yeah, I think big tech is really putting the onus on the parents. One thing we want to see is parents and tech working together. So tech has amazing technology, the ability to block and screen certain content, and parents should also, have a role in their child's lives. Maybe don't give your 10-year-old a phone, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's not solely falling on the parents to make sure that their children don't have access to pornography. As I said, it's widely available online, and it's increasingly exploitive and just horrific. And I think it's really hard for parents to be expected to prevent even accidental access. So that's when, having age verification laws, device-level filters, things like that comes in place that are really needed solutions to that problem.
Yeah, that there's not one simple answer. There is an approach and many actors, many factors involved, even with, as we heard, with just passing a convention or a law that may sound great, there still needs to be engagement of that, actually enforcing it. And that involves many actors who generally have conflicting motives, conflicting views and perspectives and roles and even responsibilities. So as we talk about that combined approach of legislation and litigation, Peter, I want to go back to you. If you could share more about your work in the legislation in Uganda, specifically with child sacrifice, how has that improved or changed the work that you're doing, and not only that law at your country's level, but if the CRC, which we've been discussing, having be part of a ratifying country, have you seen that has any effect on the work that you're doing either?
I'll give you a scenario of one case. Maybe let's go to Alan's case. The situation with Alan's case would not have happened without the support of the legal support from Center for Global Justice and the joint collaborations. This is a case of a child that had gone cold. The file had gone missing, and thankfully KCM has a memorandum of understanding with the Ugandan police, and I think we are one of the few organizations that can keep a duplicate copy of a police file as regards to the child. So the case file went missing in court, and so we had to use a duplicate copy from our office to reinstate the case. One of the students here spent hours in the court registry trying to find the lost file, and never surfaced until the judge allowed to use a duplicate copy, and it was certified. So that sufficed. And so we are dealing with those scenarios of corruption, of deeply uninformed processes of compilation and investigations, which have improved right now, but previously they were challenges. And so you go into the collaboration to keep the file, and then you sit on the same panel to inform, because our prosecutors are quite few, so they're overwhelmed with cases, and they don't take the time to do that. They have interest, but limited time to do the deeper research and investigation. And so they will rely on support systems, support paralegals, and even the investigation support that captures the scene of crime protection and make sure that you capture the key elements that are going to help the prosecution. And then you walk the journey through taking the victim and making sure that the victim is protected, and making sure that victim impact statements are done, and so it is a collective responsibility of all of us players to be able to come to a logical conclusion of a case. We have also come to, our constitution allows where we can have special session cases where they're privately funded, because most of our cases are fast in, fast out. And if the government doesn't have the resources, a case of a child abuse, a child sacrifice, will take even 5 or 10 years. In the time the child has grown, the family has lost interest, or there has been a compromise, and you have a child in social protection that needs to, you can't take away their right to education, or and you're trying to grapple with that. And so the government has provided the provisions where we can, the defense and the prosecutors can collaborate to bring many cases together, where private CSOs like KCM and others can fund. So the judiciary has provided a process that balances the justice, so that there is no leaning to one side. For the defense, they agree that the justice is for both the victim and the suspect. And so sometimes those help us to expedite the cases of the children that we are working on, so that we can be able to get logical conclusions. And some of these cases were tried through those special session trials. Unfortunately, the sustainability of that is not guaranteed, because it's based on the funding that organizations like KCM has to be able to provide. Over the years, we've caused office, we've caused amendment of some of the laws that don't clearly address the specific human rights violations, especially those that are witchcraft related, because they are embedded in culture. They were not part of the colonial legislative tools, the acts that support. We had the Witchcraft Act that was very uninformed and largely colonial, and so we had to dig deep, and then over the 10 years we've been able to convince government that there's a problem, and we worked with the prosecutors, the police, the communities, the parliament to be able to enact prevention and prohibition of human sacrifice, which is a specific law that describes a very unique, culturally deep-rooted human rights violation on children. It is, the enactment of it was controversial for two reasons. One, took 10 years, but three, there was a resistance, first from Parliament, because they realized that they are going to confront the larger congregation of the people that practice witchcraft. And so they will be losing votes. But the flip side, on the age of our advocacy, 3 months to the end of this parliament in 2021, a child, her name was Faith, 6 years old, was killed. And a witch doctor was arrested with a child's head at the gate of Parliament. And when they arrested him, he said he was taking the head of that child to one of the legislators in Parliament. And so there was a public display of witchcraft within Parliament. And so then they called us to quickly expedite the law. Of course, that has been a question on my heart. Did it have to take a child's life for that legislation to pass? Was God trying to expose the deep-rooted witchcraft within Parliament and the use of body parts? And there is the history. When we investigated that case, one of the senior police officers told me, Peter, please choose the bears you poke. Meaning that this case, because it is in the elite group in Parliament, needs not to be followed as you follow the others. And so up to this day, we have not been able to follow Faith's case because it has died calmly. And so the challenges of power, money, and play come in because for those that seek more riches, have the money to deal with the registration and processes of registration and investigation, to the cost of the blood of the children has gone. And so there is a continuous threat to the process of registration and investigation and to the care of the children that we have to have armed security of the children we have to be able to keep them safe and to accompany them to the processes of prosecution. And then taking them to the community is also a risk to that. So we still have a huge battle. But also the challenge on the legislation is also the recognition of the international, on an international level. Child sacrifice particularly is a human trafficking issue in Uganda. But the United States that informs global human trafficking trends doesn't recognize organ removal or child sacrifice as a form of exploitation. But the act of kidnap and trafficking for monetary value is there. And so we are working with a lot of different agencies to see if the US that informs global trends on trafficking is able to adopt this very unique abuse that is happening in Uganda, but particularly in Africa. And it is affecting our intent to create awareness in Uganda, but also on the global or African stage, because it is happening in West Africa now and other countries in Africa. So we have challenges, and we really appreciate the research and the documentation that validates this issue from Regent University and other partners.
Thank you for sharing the background on the challenges of passing new laws. And with the passage of the Prohibition Against Human Sacrifice Act, which is relatively recent, there was the passage of the act, which is one step, and then educating the prosecutors. It says the DPP, it's the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. It's also informing and educating the prosecutors that this law exists. And one of our other partners, Human Trafficking Institute, which is embedded in the ODPP, helped to actually print and distribute the law to the prosecutors' offices around the country so that these prosecutors knew what the law said and how to actually prosecute. So a follow-up question is, with the passage of this law, have you seen it utilized yet? Is it too soon? And what are you seeing with any change from the passage of that act?
The passing of it came at the time that we are still also begging for government will. So the passing of it is one thing. The law cannot be used without its gazette. The gazette of it was a requirement of about $50 US, which the government had to pay so that the law can be gazetted. And we thought they had taken the initiative. So after 2 years, we realized it wasn't gazetted because the government did not have $50 to pay for it. So KCA had to get $50 go to the government to pay, so I gazette the law so it can be used. So we lost 2 years of the use. And then later on picking it up to centralize it. And so with the help of HTI, we collaborated to develop investigation guidelines, prosecution guidelines, and also dissemination. First to train the police and the prosecutors, but also to use it. Now we have started using it just recently. We lost 2 years, and it is a very deterrent law. It gives very clear punishment on the financiers, on the kidnappers, all the witch doctors that clearly cut and mutilate these children. And so I think it is still early stages, but we've seen the impact of its use, and we hope that it can be disseminated all over the country to be used as a tool. It is clear that it defines all the ingredients of the crime, and it captures all those perpetrators that are involved, whether you held a hand when they were mutilating, or you kidnapped, or you transported, or you have a punishment to pay. Now, as a Christian, I know this is difficult, but the contention of international law in regards to the death penalty, as a Christian, the maximum sentence for that is the death penalty. We, as an organization, believe that death, sanctity of life only belongs in the hands of God, and so we had that contention. We gave our opinion, but the members of Parliament saw it right from the consultations nationally that the punishment of death for anyone who kills a child is worthy. But the law is being used, and we hope that we can have a lot of resources to reach the rest of the country to make it more usable. And where it has not been applied, we work together with prosecutors to cause amendments of the charges, which has happened in many cases where the prosecutors or the police has charged wrongly using other different legal tools that are not sufficient to describe the type of crime.
You speak of losing 2 years, and lest we think that is simply an African situation. As a brief aside, in the clinic, we are utilizing a law that allows for record relief for human trafficking survivors in Virginia, and that law had been on the books for 2 years before the clinic was launched, and not a single petition had been filed. That law had not been utilized until we stepped in to notify certain jurisdictions that it existed and actually then identify and represent victims. And so the law itself is not sufficient. There has to be follow-up and execution. And before, Tori, I want to eventually get to you about progress that you're seeing, but I want to have one more follow-up for you, Peter, about the CRC. Does that come up in your work? Is it relevant in your work that the crimes you're addressing are directly addressed in this convention?
The CRC is used largely as a benchmark on the policy developments and the legal tools that the government looks at in the enactment, but also in amendments as we progress in its use and understanding. The local villager in my village doesn't know any idea about the CRC, but it has largely informed a lot of our local legislative tools as well as approaches and policies that have been developed by different child protection agencies, especially the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, in which the docket of children is covered. And so in all our conversations and developments, it is a reference tool for purposes of legislation and use and reference for best interest of the child. I know my contention in that area is that there is a lot of emerging issues, and so there is a lot of quick references that must be made to catch up with the emerging issues within the local context, especially deeply cultural situations that are missed. I went to the United Nations in 2017 on a UN expert workshop on witchcraft and human rights, and we realized that there were issues that were actually not addressed, and so the UN Assembly on Human Rights had to come up with different resolutions that would guide nations and states, which are and many nations are probably not aware of it, that would guide approaches to witchcraft and human rights violations. But outside of just that witchcraft and human rights violations, that's one aspect that probably is not addressed. There is contention on certain aspects. Some areas on the age of the child is different from other different areas, and so there is a fight between, say, the Eastern countries, or what is the age of the child, or the faith, cultural divide, and so there's a clash in between, and so and then the emerging issues of gender issues that are still very raw in Africa, especially in Uganda, where we are in space of what to do, because they're foreign, we don't know what to do. If you deal with it, you are branded against, and I think there is a dialogue required to see where it's operationalized is used. But for us, I think there is awareness of it within the policy level, government level, legislation. On the local grounds, not very much as a tool. I personally think it's a wonderful tool. I was listening to the US aspect of it, which is interesting because the aspects of human rights that I don't want to use the word policed, but guided by the Western world in the context. And so the deviation from that is taken as a disobedience per se. And so I think there is a dialogue required, even on these very controversial issues of gender. I was with the US Embassy recently, and I said, let's please have a conversation on the issue of homosexuality, when I receive a child in our center who has been abused sexually, it's a sexual abuse issue. It's not a stand against homosexuality. That would be another aspect, but it's a sexual abuse issue of a child, of somebody of the same sex who has abused a child. But if I go with our team to arrest that person, it is quickly branded as against. And that's, so then we fear to engage in child protection issues because we are going to be branded and you can't move anywhere because it's a misunderstanding. And so there are areas of contention, emerging issues that are very foreign to Africa, which I believe America and other countries were at that many years maybe back, and it is requiring a genuine conversation to understand and to disagree. But then we go back to the Bible, the wisdom of God, our identity, and the value of life and what we place it, and that has diverged very far from us. Thank you.
Yes, it goes back to how we frame the issue. The framing of the issue is central. And are we concerned about the child and the harm to the child, or some other concern that tends to trump placing value on the life of a child? Thank you for sharing. Tori, back to you, as you all are in the fight against sexual exploitation and protection of children. We've spent much of today assessing perhaps negative developments and challenges. Could you share some of the progress you're seeing and how you are hopeful in the work that you all are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, it is dark work at times. I think not only, in our work standing up against big tech, there's a lot of spiritual darkness when it comes to sexual exploitation. So we as an organization try to talk a lot about our victories and the things that are going well. We celebrate every small victory where we can, because there's a lot of losses that come with that too. So we're very thankful and aware of how meaningful and important it is when we do get victories. So I might have gotten a bit ahead of myself earlier when I was talking about our cases, but I love talking about our cases that are going well and being successful. So I'll just briefly mention again our case in the Northern District of Alabama. That was the first time a court has denied a Section 230 defense for a pornography company. So that's a huge victory. And yeah, it's significant because as I was discussing earlier, Section 230 litigation is very complicated and nuanced, and the attorneys for these other companies are really great, and they get paid very well to do their jobs well. But I think it requires careful pleading to make a case like that, and just knowledge of how the platforms operate, the ins and outs. So it takes a lot of time, I think, to make sure that we are bringing the cases that we think are going to be successful. And that, so far, is one of them that is going in our favor. So that's very exciting. And then we have a Twitter case as well that was just argued on appeal in front of the Ninth Circuit back in February. That case, really sad facts in that case, but we're hopeful that from the Ninth Circuit oral argument, the judges are finally understanding that the nuances of Section 230 shouldn't apply when there is actual knowledge of benefiting from a sex trafficking victim on their platform. So we're still waiting for the opinion to come down in that case, but we're very hopeful. And if it doesn't go our way, then we'll probably appeal to the Supreme Court. So that's exciting. And then a number of other circuits are also looking at these issues through not necessarily a provider lens of hosting the material on their platform. They're being pled as a design defect or some sort of product negligence, products liability. And we found that those cases, when there's a design defect on how the social media platform was built, those cases typically are seeing more success. Now, they try to raise a Section 230 defense regardless, but that so far hasn't been super successful for our opposition. So that's another thing that is exciting to think about, some progress. And then I'll just briefly mention the Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton Supreme Court case. I'm not sure, did any of the other panels talk about that at all? Okay. Then I'll go into a bit of detail. So in January, there was a case argued in front of the Supreme Court, Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton. And that was based on a challenge, a facial challenge to an age verification law that was passed in Texas, essentially requiring, back to what I was speaking about earlier, a reasonable, commercially reasonable method of age verification for pornography websites who want to operate in Texas. So a very straightforward bill. It was challenged on constitutional grounds, saying that adults shouldn't be burdened with being able to access this speech. And so it made its way up to the Supreme Court, and the justices are basically being asked to reevaluate questions that the court has answered with regards to age verification for like the past 25 years. Essentially, whether website level filters are the least restrictive means of achieving a compelling governmental interest of protecting minors from being exposed to pornography. So that's kind of like the broader question that the court was looking at. But at this point, we think the court's really going to decide whether it should be, which scrutiny level should apply. So whether it's going to be strict scrutiny and then have to meet that, least restrictive means compelling governmental interest test, or whether it's a lower scrutiny level, so rational basis or intermediate scrutiny. And that argument was extremely encouraging to listen to. The justices had a very robust understanding of the nature of the internet, how it works. 25 years ago, they didn't understand how the internet worked. It was like still a new thing. They were still trying to explain what it was, in their opinions. And now they understand the issues of the proliferation of online pornography. And it was really encouraging to see them understand that and sort of push back against, the argument that filters aren't effective or they're too much work. There's a number of extremely effective ways to verify a person's age without verifying their identity and allow them to have unrestricted access to pornography for adults. So we're really encouraged by that as well, just seeing the technology, how it's changed, and we'll hopefully have, massive positive legal ramifications as a result of this case. So those are a few positive things, progress we see moving forward.
And to follow up with those, I pulled up, we have some great questions from you all, so I'm actually going to jump into them to make sure we have time for those. But there's one for you, Tori, about how has the use of AI affected the fight against the exploitation of children online?
That is a great question, and that's something we're still trying to figure out. As you all know, AI is rapidly developing, and we know the law moves slowly, so the law is trying to move in response to AI. Especially with regards to sexual exploitation and specifically child sexual abuse material. We already know that with regards to child sexual abuse material, that also includes AI-generated CSAM. So that is still considered illegal. You cannot create, own, possess that, even if it's not depicting a real child. I think public policy would say that the existence of CSAM, whether or not it's a real child, is harmful and damaging enough that is still going to be, considered criminalized. But when it comes to things like deepfake pornography of adults, states are still moving in response to, figure out solutions of how to criminalize it, and at the federal level as well. That's what we're seeing. So there's a number of bills at the federal level. I can think of one called the Take It Down Act, which would criminalize the creation and uploading of non-consensual, including AI-generated deepfake pornography. And there's a number of others that allow civil remedies and other avenues of justice for victims to pursue.
And as a plug for the collaboration with the Center for Global Justice, some of our students this semester have been researching along those lines of how could this be categorized under current laws, and how could it be categorized even under trafficking in order to be prosecuted. So if you ask this question and you're interested, you can come join the Center for Global Justice. But I want to ask a similar question to Peter with just the development of technology. How have you seen that grow, perhaps become an issue and exploitation in Uganda?
We are catching up as a country in regards to technology advancement, especially there is not very much control processes. I had myself to stop the internet in my house because there was no process of control. I was asking the internet company, and so our investigative systems have no technology available to them to use, so the knowledge of it is very limited, and the access to phones, especially those developed for quick, cheaper options for access, are available from different countries. And so there is no sieving, there's no protections. Online exploitation is actually an emerging issue that the police hasn't even grasped on how to deal with. We had a conversation with our partners on how do we even start the investigations, because the police doesn't have the capacity to intercept or to capture and to deal with. And yet, internet access is growing in Uganda particularly, and children are accessing and youth are accessing unlimitedly without any, and so there's quite a difficult issue to deal with right now for us, and so we certainly need help. In our coalitions, that's one of the top things on how to come with. I had a meeting just a month ago, just about a month ago, from a US former Army SEALs who is technologically advanced, and he was talking to the Ugandan police on the technology that the US is having to get into the space and find on these scenarios. And the police, this is the top police, were wild and they had no idea how to do that. And so for us, it's a dangerous aspect that we are still grappling with. It is happening, we've seen a lot of that. The investigation of it and the validation of it into investigation is still a very complex matter for us. We need help and guidance for those that are advanced.
And I'll stay with you, Peter, to ask a similar question that I asked Tori. You're facing very dark cases. The worst of humanity is what we see in both of your work. So thank you for the work that you are doing. Not everyone is capable, is suited, has the capacity emotionally, psychologically, intellectually to engage in the work that you do. But could you share some of the progress that you've seen, the hope, again, that question of what are you seeing that's positive in your work?
First, every day when I go to work, I find over 600 children on the campus that are going through, some have gone through rehabilitation and have regained their lives and in school studying. For those that we started with, especially Alan, who was 7 when he was attacked. He's 21. His case was concluded when he was 19. And he's going through high school at 21 and he wants to be a doctor. Another boy, and these boys are probably, they're now adults and they've given me permission because they want to be advocates. One of them is another boy whose genitals were mutilated. I accompanied him when he was 4 to Australia to have genital reconstruction surgery. He recovered and I took him last year again when Meg was in Uganda. He's now over 18 and he would otherwise have died because there was no medical care and he's alive. Right now, there are 2 children in America. A year ago I came here and I was asking for prayer for a dear child who was kidnapped at 3 years old almost. The witch doctors cut her tongue, put her on a shrine for a whole year, tied her legs and arms, put a clothes in her mouth, and they constantly drained blood for a whole year until she became disabled. She can't talk, she can't walk. She was the first child in our rehab center. She grew and developed scoliosis in her back, and she needed life-saving surgery. She survived. She's here in the United States and got her surgery last year through the prayers of many people and through the help of the Center for Global Justice. The witch doctor of that child was arrested after 8 years, prosecuted and sentenced to 46 years. He appealed not against the crime but against the sentence because he was old. He wanted a lesser sentence. And that case became precedent in the Ugandan law as the first counter appeal from the prosecutors. And now he was sentenced to life on his appeal. And that child is alive right now in Utah. And I see many kids have survived different horrors that are going through life. To see them recover is the biggest encouragement that we can have, and to see children survive. We have gone through a lot of prosecutions, and we see progress, that the country is appreciating that there is a problem that needs to be tackled immediately, which wasn't the case before. We have had some international recognition of this matter, on child sacrifice especially, at the UN level, and now at the global level as an emerging issue that needs to be addressed. We have had over 300 witch doctors and traffickers put in prison for that crime. We celebrate those wins, but also we are aware that there must be awareness of those that commit the crime to mitigate, to stop the crime. So we reach out to them in prison and share the gospel with them, and I would say that over 15 of those that are in prison have given their life to the Lord and have collaborated with us to give us more information of those that are still doing the same. We have celebrated the collaborations now with our government, the police, the DPP, with Regent and other locals to be able to fight this problem head on together. And we're seeing progress. There's so many things to celebrate. There's hope that children killed in ritual murders and sacrifice will come to an end, we believe. And we hope that the world will recognize that the issues that are emerging of child abuse that are happening in a small country in Uganda is a responsibility of everyone in the world, and that we can bring that to an end before it escalates everywhere.
Thank you. And I'll circle back to how we can all get involved and support the work. There's another student question, or audience question maybe, from professors. But the question for you, Tori, is Nkosi working to get Section 230 repealed to better go after platforms exploiting children, and what would it take to accomplish this?
Yes, we are hoping for Section 230 repeal or reform of some sort. I mean, Section 230, the big tech companies will be fighting tooth and nail to let it stand at all costs, because that's the only thing preventing them from having any sort of chance at liability, right? So we always say, even if Section 230 didn't exist, that doesn't mean strict liability for these platforms. It still means we would just have to prove our case against them. So even that, it's still going to come with challenges, even if it's repealed or reformed in some way. There's been, some appetite. I think a Section 230 sunset bill was floated around last Congress, didn't pass. I don't think it was even introduced. It was more of just like something to get legislators talking about what would this look like, is this possible? We of course think it's possible. We would love to see it happen, but there's definitely going to be a big fight, and it's hard to say what the appetite on Capitol Hill is really for making that change. big tech lobbyists are, again, very good at their jobs. They're paid a lot of money, and they're funded by, the world's richest companies. So I know we'd love to say that money doesn't play a role in justice, but it certainly does when it comes to repealing existing laws that are protecting the richest and largest companies in the world. So yeah, if Section 230 was repealed or reformed in some way, it would absolutely have a meaningful impact on the work that we're doing, the work that many others are doing in this sphere. But as far as the possibility or probability, that is certainly an uphill battle.
Speaking of uphill battles and needing support, what can we know about your work and perhaps getting involved? And maybe you could speak to the collaboration between Regional Law and Nkosi.
Yeah, absolutely. The Center for Global Justice has been an incredible partner to Nkosi for many years. I was also the beneficiary of that collaboration. I interned with Nkosi when I was a student here through the Center for Global Justice, and was just able to have an incredible experience learning about this area of law and other legal issues related to sexual abuse and exploitation. If these are issues you're interested in or maybe interested in, happy to share more. We also have internship programs over the summer and during the fall and spring semesters. We'll work with you for getting class credit, all those good things. But yeah, partnership is extremely important. We are not a very large staff at all. I think our law center team has 5 full-time attorneys, we have 1 paralegal. So we're a small team. We rely heavily on the help and research and just brilliant minds of others, especially Regent students. I always call it the pipeline of Regent to Nkosi because we have a number of attorneys, including myself, who are Regent alum as well. So it's a great organization. I really enjoy working there, and I, of course, enjoy the partnership and amazing students from Regent who I've had the pleasure of working with there too.
Thank you. And to Peter, there are a number of questions about involvement, engagement. First, how can we in the U.S. help Uganda help Uganda in the fight to end child sacrifice?
There are many ways you can help. One, I'll start again with the way that the Center for Global Justice has helped us is being on the ground is difficult. It is not a very adversity terrain, and so it calls for somebody ready to come and fold their sleeves and run with the team in the fields. It's dusty when it is sunny. There is no winter though, and so for those of you that are wanting to experience the field of what it means to rescue a child from the hands of these traffickers, and also walk the journey of prosecution and supporting these children, you're welcome. We are right now setting up our own legal clinic, and the aim of it is to enhance our last years of experience in the documentation of the cases we've worked through. Let it be at an individual case level, which has a lot of dynamics, and also at a regional level. So we are leading right now a coalition of organizations on the African continent to be able to bring together the discussion of this issue for child sacrifice and how we deal with it and work it. So there's a lot of legal and social research and documentation that is required. And I would say that the validity of that comes from academia. And we are field people. I am like here and there. So that's one key area, because then it will validate the issue on a global stage, including the appeal we are having at the US Department of State and the Congress to see the recognition of this issue. There are many children we have. You can sponsor a child of a witch doctor. One of the things we do, not only rescue children but the witch doctors that are in prison, we go because and get them when they're vulnerable and bring them for education at our center. That's why we have so many other children in our school, because we do not want our pursuit of justice for
victim take away the right of a child to education, because the witch doctors who have killed a child are the primary parents and support to their own children. And so we bring them, and so our school has children of the perpetrators who are in prison for life, mingling with the children that have survived, and they are thriving. And most of them, we take them back into the prison to visit their parents or uncles, and they understand that what happened, it wasn't their fault. Some of these children are branded witches or witch doctors' children, and so they are isolated, bullied in schools, and they can't go anywhere. So that's how we bring them. And so we rely heavily on people who sponsor a child from that situation to take them through the life support.
On that, quickly, if I could interject, there's also a question about the parents of the children who are being sacrificed. What is their involvement? You talk about when the witch doctors are the parents, you take in their children. What about the parents of the victim?
So our trauma care cuts across the victim. You cannot just provide trauma support to the child, because at one point, if the child has family, you're going to take them back to their family reintegration after the closure of the cases when it is safe. And so our support is for trauma, social protection, and care extends to the immediate family of the child who is in our social protection, so that when the child goes back, the parents or the caregivers are prepared not to re-traumatize this child and provide care for them and protection when they go back. And these families have become family to us. It's long-term engagement. There is no level of trauma counseling, really, unless God intervenes, that you can tell a mother who has lost a child in such a grievous situation. It's love and brotherhood and sisterhood and family. And so most of them are our family members. They come. There is almost no boundaries in regards. They will call you anytime when episodes explode, and they just want somebody to listen to them. So we extend our care to those families. The other thing is we rely solely on donations, small donations from people that are sustaining our operations. So you can visit our website, sign a petition. One of the petitions we are calling on is a witness protection law. Uganda doesn't have a witness protection and victim law, and we are working with different agencies and government to make sure that there is enactment of that law. One of the things that has worked for us previously is a petition where we've gathered over 20,000 signatures from all over the world and caused the enactment of the new law of prevention and prohibition of human sacrifice. So if it worked with that, or we think it can work with the new law, we have already great progress in it, and so we have a petition on our website that you can sign. If there are so many other ways, you can email us. If you are gifted in different ways, you can pray. We rely solely and highly on prayer. The protection of our team, and the children, and the protection of our minds to continue. And our team to continue. We literally peruse through decapitated bodies. We pick up pieces and we see the blood, we smell it. We see the parents in our corridors every day, and it becomes quite deep-rooted in us to continue. So prayer, if you can, it would be appreciated. And come and visit. I was asking maybe the next symposium will be in Uganda. So, thank you.
And one more to you, Peter. These are great questions. How does KCM work to combat the belief that perpetuates child sacrifice?
We have awareness programs, especially those that are tailored on scientific evidence, behavior change communications or social norms, mindset change, and those that are deeply to spiritual. And so we reach out from bottom up
for communities to come up with ideas on how to abandon the use of body parts for witchcraft. And largely share that you don't have to kill a child to get wealth. We provide means of how you can get wealth or work towards improving your poverty levels. We address issues of poverty because most of these cultural issues are coming from the poverty that is everywhere in our country. We go into the schools to the point that where we can teach children karate on where to hit an attacker when they come. And then the children go back and they tell us how their parents are involved in witchcraft, and then we go and meet with their parents, starting with our own children on campus and those that we have come across and in the red spot areas of the country, because it's hard to reach the whole country at large, so we are very selective. But yes, we reach out to the communities through mindset change, behavioral communication, and sharing the gospel, because we believe that God can heal and restore. Ugandans are highly spiritual in many forms, and sharing the gospel with our communities when we can is also worked. We have also reached out to families to deal with the issue of forgiveness. And Alan, his father, came to me. He's now a member of our church, and told me after probably 10 years or 8 years, and says, Pastor, I forgive the people that castrated my son. And we deal with that with all the children in our care, teaching them that one of my boys is now 18, he still grapples with the issue of forgiveness. How can I forgive them? And one of the questions one of the children asked me is that, are there some things that I have to forgive? And rightly so, yeah. The Lord works through that. And so our community cuts across those that are on our campus, and we reach to them on those areas, and then we go into the community to create awareness. There is also another issue where people, when they suspect that you're a witch now, they kill you because they think that you are going to use your witchcraft to kill children. And so we are also dealing with that and say, okay, we are not, after realizing that these people have a problem, then they attack them. And so we are trying to create that balance of reaction from the gravity. We also demonstrate the tricks they use in the witchcraft. If you go to YouTube and watch a video called How to Catch a Witch Doctor, we have used the former witch doctors to be able to educate the community, the tricks they have used over the years to recruit people into these behaviors. We also know that there are those that do it for the sake of economic benefit, and so they hide in trickery, and they trick others and manipulate their mind and take their money. And once they realize they have taken all their money, they bring them into a scenario where they kill a child. And once they kill a child, it's not for spiritual stuff or witchcraft, it is basically an economic issue. Once they kill a child, then they become murderers and they're not going to report to police. So it's a game and tactic where they kill a child to stop the crime of the witch doctors, the people. Either way, it is evil. So yes, we go into the community, we have radio advice, we do a nationwide campaign for the elite where members of parliament and the governments come every year. We usually have about 2,000 people to where the children in our care do a musical as a way of appealing. And there's no better impact when you have an appeal from a victim that has gone through that ordeal. And most people leave with some level of education. It's hard, we are limited in resources, but we do what we can.
That sounds even similar to education efforts widespread in the US, sharing about the impacts of pornography on children, just sharing even the science, so revealing the truth, sharing what is true about these practices and how they're harmful. I'll end by letting you each share. There was a question which you've partly touched on when we discussed hope, but the question is, how has the Lord encouraged you in your very difficult work? So I'll let you think for a moment on what final takeaway you'd like to share on how you've been personally encouraged. While you think, I want to share a few connections that Regent Law has and ways for you all to get involved and engaged. If you've been learning something today you didn't know was an issue, or didn't know there is advocacy going on, or even have been exposed to different viewpoints on these issues and want to learn more, first is to get involved with the journal. If there are 2 L's or 1 L's here, there's an interest meeting for the journal April 1st at noon. 2 L's can join. I think all the 1 L's are in class currently. So this is for the 2 L's. And then for anyone interested in the fall to get involved with the Center for Global Justice, we have center staff who participate in research, both for KCM and NCOSE, for Shared Hope and ADF and other organizations involved in these efforts. We have research during the school year, and then internships in Uganda, internships with NCOSE, with ADF, all over the world. And so keep an eye out for those summer internships. Some are still available for this coming summer if anyone is still trying to figure out what they're going to do. And then we also are developing a fellowship program. So after graduating, being hired to work for a year or longer, Lauren Eason is our current Center for Global Justice Fellow, spent part of her time in Uganda and part on campus here. And we're also hoping to send a fellow for a year to Uganda again, perhaps in collaboration with either Human Trafficking Institute in Uganda, working with the prosecutor's office, or with Uganda Christian University, and developing clinical work engaged with KCM to support their legal team. So really exciting work, and as you can hear, our students are engaged both with NCOSE and KCM in Uganda in current cases and current issues. People who need our support, they're understaffed and underfunded, and we get to provide essential support to these organizations. We also heard our speakers have been engaged as guardian ad litem, so think about that as a possibility as you practice law, or even volunteering with CASA, court-appointed special advocates. They have a range of volunteer opportunities from a couple hours a month to a few hours a week. And I've heard them say they would love to have any of you all volunteer with them. So they have info sheets out there, or we can also provide through the center. And Professor Combs also noted, if these are topics you're interested in to engage in, as a student you have time even to pick your student note, to dive in and research in these areas and impact the area of study, the academic development of these topics. So thank you so much for just engaging and considering what's been proposed today and debated. But I do want to wrap up this panel before we kind of have a close and closing prayer by turning back to Tori and Peter about a way that you've been encouraged in your work.
I can start. I was just reflecting and thinking about how I started in this journey to fight exploitation. It really started when I was in undergrad, and I just really felt the Lord calling me to fight sex trafficking. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? It's huge, big field. I didn't know anything about it. But as I have had the opportunity to be engaged in this line of work and do this work, I assume you all would relate to this, being in law school and becoming attorneys eventually. You have, a deep-rooted desire to see justice happen, regardless of what that looks like or what area of law you're practicing in. And I think as I have engaged in this litigation and working with NCOSE, I think the Lord has encouraged me by just reminding me that He sits on the throne and that ultimate justice is in his hands. So even though we see a lot of losses, we see a lot of evil people and evil organizations, and I don't use that word lightly, it is pure evil what a lot of these pornography companies are doing and what they're engaged in and just what they're proliferating and selling to people. I think it's been encouraging for me to know that final justice belongs in his hands, and that while he is slow to anger, he will not ultimately fail to act. So even though on this earth things seem slow, or the battles seem long fought, or the courts are frustrating in their opinions and not doing what we want them to do, it's just encouraging to me to know that he's above it all, and at the end there will be justice.
I've been encouraged in many different ways. One particularly that some of those children that we started with in understanding the issue have grown up and have taken up the leadership of the organization. We run a couple of programs, and I see from all our 5 programs, 3 of those programs are led by the children rescued from these circumstances and carry on with a deeper appeal. And it does not, the Lord has, through those difficult circumstances, multiplied the advocacy for people that understand, that have been encouraged by the feeling that we are not alone. In the beginning of this awareness, it seemed like so, because I remember I went to Australia to take a 3.5-year-old boy for genital reconstruction surgery, and I was interviewed by Sydney Morning Herald, a big newspaper there, which published an article on the front page, and my government was saying I was speaking ill against the government, that the government is not doing anything at the time. People told me don't come back because they went to my office and ransacked it, and they had put charges of treason against me. And to see that now we have a partnership with government agencies to fight the same crime is quite encouraging. And they've come to an awareness that there's a problem that needs to be dealt with. Being encouraged by the children that have survived, hugely miracles of children that have survived even where there was no hope. The little girl in Utah, Hope, who was abused badly, now I have the privilege to call my daughter because our family adopted her. When you go to her, I bet there's anyone in this room that has the best smile. She smiles, she doesn't speak, she doesn't talk, yet she smiles and has the best joy. And you just go to her and see the smile that she has that beams with hope and encourages us to continue, irrespective whether she's the biggest advocate. And so through the eyes of those children who speak to us every day that we will leave if you won't put your hands down. It takes me back to Leviticus 20, where the anger of God is revealed for those that were killing children to Molech. And God's pronouncement and punishment. But then to see the restoration that God provides at the end, even to the gravity of this crime, that if those people that are doing it change their hearts, I will restore them. And to see the witch doctors in prison now working with us, giving us information to fight this crime, yet they have stained blood of those that they have killed. It has given me hope that the grace of God is valuable to all of us to bring sanity if we come together and fight.
Thank you both for sharing. We can give Tori and Peter a round of applause. And you all can sit just for a moment because I'm going to close this very briefly, but in hearing the encouragement, just a reminder that our enemy is not those who have different views than us. Our enemies are not those who approach a problem differently, an academic question differently than us. That what a gift that we can come and hear different views. And grateful, Professor Cohn, for the background, just setting the landscape on what the CRC is, and Professor Dwyer and Professor Gillis for your views on that as well, to help learn about this issue for those of us who are maybe a few years removed from family law, such as myself. And then to hear as well, and Joseph and Dr. Duplessis about the developing issues related to identity of children and parental rights, parental authority, and then to conclude with our partners and practitioners with very specific and heavy issues that they're dealing with in this exact realm. And the reminder that the burden of justice is not, of righting all evil is not on our shoulders, but we do have a role to play. And so I encourage you, as certain issues have perhaps you found exciting, or something new that you heard today, that you decided and feel strongly is not okay, and you want to do something about it. That's why you're here. That's why we're here at Regent Law School, and to grow and to learn. And so take a next step, take a follow-up step. I encourage you, if you get a chance, to chat with our speakers or follow up with them or look into these organizations and continue to research that we do have a role to play, and we can make a change where we see that there's been injustice or that there could be progress. And so we are here not just to learn and to debate and discuss, but to take practical steps. So ask the Lord what that is and obey. Obey quickly and fully. So on that note, I'm going to close us in prayer and release us. God, we thank you for all that you are doing, that there is hope, there is light as we see dark places and even actors that seem to be operating from ill motives. God, would you continue to shape just the way that we see these issues, to be curious, intellectually curious, and to press in and research where we have interest from you. God, I thank you for each of our speakers. Would you bless them, the work that they're doing. We pray for just continued revelation and insight in order to progress these areas of research, the areas of study, and the work on the ground in the field. We bless KCM and Nicosi and ADF. Thank you, Lord, for the work that they're doing and the partnership with the Center for Global Justice and the work of the Journal as well. Thank you for all that's been shared and discussed today. We ask that you would make it clear what next steps we can take, that this is not just sharing of ideas, but inspiring and spurring on for next steps as an academic institution and as law students and future lawyers. So thank you that you are shaping us to change the world. In your name we pray, amen. Thank you for coming, thank you for joining us. As a reminder, you need to sign up for each session that you've attended, and if there are any other announcements, I'll let the Journal staff jump up here, but otherwise we are dismissed.